So yeah, thanks for coming here. Firstly, we'd like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation as the traditional owners of the land on which the university stands. We respectfully recognise elders past, present and future. This is I think the third talk in the Learning Analytics LTIF that we're running this year. It's a project across the university, and we're running these talks to help raise awareness of the potentials of analytics. We've got some other activity going on. We've been running some focus groups with staff to sort of tease out what analytics here could look like. And we've also got our blog, practicalanalytic.wordpress.com. So it's great to be able to welcome Dr. Toby Jouliffe to this session. Toby is the Honours Coordinator at Visual Arts, Melbourne University, and I was keen to get Toby to come along to talk to our project because I'd seen Toby present about what he does with learning analytics previously, and the stories, the ways that he works with student behaviour when they're not in class, so I thought it was really impressive. So he describes himself, I think it was spit and sawdust type of teacher. Yeah. So very hands-on. This is another very practical session. It's also using the Blackboard analytics, which we don't have, but it was also interesting to follow up from our LTIP last year where we had Gregor from Melbourne Uni come and show the kind of full way that they use Blackboard. So it'll be interesting also just to see what's available. So will you please make Toby welcome.
Thanks very much. Hope you can hear me all. I was both delighted and a bit surprised to be asked here because I have no background in IT, no background in e-learning whatsoever. I am a kind of a Joe Bloggs lecturer B, teaching, supervising, that sort of thing. So this is a bit of a just kind of a talk a little bit about how I do it. I'm sure Gregor and Travis and others probably have a much better view of Blackboard, where it's going and where e-learning is going more generally. I'm only really kind of at the coalface of all of that. So what they may have been talking to you about later is probably what's trickling a little bit down to me, but that's what I'm interested in. Had no idea what to call this at all, so I decided to go for the least sexiest title ever, hoping that nobody would turn up to it, because whenever I try and talk about this to colleagues, about 3 people turn up. Using Blackboard analytics to change student learning. I was looking at this on the tram coming up, and I just thought that's actually a terrible title because it suggests a kind of behaviouralist approach, that actually it's about selling the idea of e-learning to students, and it's about getting them online more, etc. And actually, I'm not going to talk about that at all. I'm actually talking about understanding what to do with them when they are online. So it's not really a behaviouralist kind of B.F. Skinner or Pavlov or whatever. It's much more about developing their knowledge of e-learning whilst they're actually online. So there's much more reward and keep them here. A little bit about me. I was going to use my university headshot, but it makes me look about 75, so I won't. But a little bit about me is that I originally started out as a high school teacher, English and music in the UK. Did that for about 4 or 5 years, and perhaps I think that's probably one of the reasons why I'm kind of still interested in pedagogy and teaching. I'm very much interested in that. I'm not a pedagogue though. I'm not even an e-learning specialist. I'm a teacher, and I always have been. I probably always will be. So, but then whilst I was teaching, it's probably a story that most of you have probably had. Whilst I was teaching, I was also studying, and then did my master's and PhD in art history because that's the way I like to roll. And then I taught for 6 years before arriving in Melbourne 3 years ago now, and I taught in a very small specialist higher education art school, and also with the Open University, which kind of you might be familiar with, particularly things. So that kind of fostered my interest and knowledge just through day-to-day practice. But you know, say I had no background in IT. I say I couldn't even get this to work earlier, so that's fine. But I'm currently teaching and supervising. I'm just a general lecturer B. I have no particular kind of research area in terms of e-learning. My research areas are all in the fine arts and research practice. And I'm also recently the head of the honours programme. Okay, it's amazing really, I'm only 12, it's fine. So what I'm going to do today is I'm just going to set out my kind of research, which is just kind of a day-to-day teaching research more than anything else. I'm also going to focus a little bit on University of Melbourne more generally, just because I have to. They're the people who pay my salary. Pedagogy and literature review. This may be dull. I'll try and do that really, really quickly. It probably will be dull. And then I'm going to overview and demonstration of Blackboard performance dashboard and subject reports. I understand that you don't have Blackboard analytics, so some of these things might seem strange to you, and they seem strange to me too. I'm just going to show you how I use them. Then there will be some statistics. This will be dull. I'm an artist and I'm a historian. I hate spreadsheets. Some of the findings, now that's probably why you're here, actually what it tells us. I really want to focus not on generating statistics, but on using them. And that's what I'm focusing on. I'm not really interested in generating statistics for statistics' sake for auditing purposes. I just want to be able to move on and to apply those things. So there are going to be some recommendations. Some of these are going to be practical kind of curriculum design focused, actually to do with the day-to-day teaching, and some might also be technologically focused, but I say I'm by no means things like that. Then there will be some frequently asked questions, like who are you and why are you here? That's one I get quite a lot. And then there'll also be some questions, etc., because I'm on this journey just as you are. I'm sure many of you will just be lecturers and instructors who are kind of interested in how this works, not just what it is. That's the hope anyway. So if you have questions, I might not be able to ask them if they're to do with technology, but I can only offer you a perspective of how I might approach it. Those of you who might, I'm sure most of you are more familiar with Melbourne than I am, but if you're unfamiliar, I work at the Victorian College of the Arts down in South Bank, and we employ an atelier model. That's to say, a studio-intensive, bottom-up model. We're not yet a kind of research-focused faculty. We have about 120 intake on our Bachelor of Fine Arts, so in total across Masters and PhD we might have 450 to 500 students. But we also offer extensive short courses, breadth subjects, community and adult ed courses as well, some accredited, some not. Now what we have, and this is perhaps the reason why I'm so interested in this, and I don't know if it's the same in your art and design, but we have traditionally high attrition rates. So to say we have a lot of students who drop out in the first year and increasingly in the second year. It's no higher than any other similarly sized specialist institution, and there are lots and lots of different reasons for that, okay? But we also have lower than average e-learning engagement. So we have higher attrition, and of course, you know, management want to know why we're losing so many students. That's what they want to know. Now I'm thinking e-learning is one way of identifying, but also as a way of nursing students through it. So there's some purpose there, I hope. The strategy of this kind of research thing is to evaluate and review the current practices. I arrived here just over 2 years ago, so this is my third year here at the University of Melbourne. And I came in with, let's just say, my very esteemed colleague in the next office to me only bought a mobile phone last year. I have never received an email from him in 3 years, okay? The subject of e-learning generates absolutely no interest in my faculty whatsoever, okay? Reasons for that, generational, but also lack of strategic support as well. You know, with restructuring, etc., we lost the physical presence of e-learning coordinators, and we actually lost the very physical presence of IT practitioners. I just realised this is being recorded, isn't it? But we did. But needless to say, this is why I was a bit surprised and shocked to see so many people here, actually. In particular, I'm going to be looking at redesigning the current layout of learning management system. Our current platform is Blackboard 9.1x, and I put 9.1x because it might have changed since I left about half an hour ago. It's constantly being updated, sometimes without us knowing about it, and sometimes not. I'm interested in quantitative reporting and qualitative interviews through student focus groups. Okay? I recognise that this learning analytics thing will generate numbers, it will not generate attitudes. It will not reflect upon those students' actual understanding and use of it, what they like and what they don't like. I understand that. So there are things. So through the graduates, I'm actually undertaking a grad cert in university teaching as well as part of my professional development. And I've actually had the opportunity to work with a colleague from another faculty to assess their e-learning strategies in order to take it back to my home department, etc. Now, I was chatting to Howard about the kind of ethics of actually showing you real data, because I know I've gone to a lot of e-learning conferences where you get a lot of e-learning kind of bigwigs, all in kind of the chancellery, etc., who use generated data, generated by themselves in order to prove how these things work. This is actually real data. Non-identifiable, no names, nothing else. This is the story of Critical and Theoretical Studies 1, subject I teach, in the first year. You'll notice it's quite busy on a Sunday and a Thursday, and not busy any other time. Now, this is the type of information that you can gather from Blackboard Analytics, and this is just a course activity. It just gives you a general idea of the number of hours in which the LMS is being actively used, okay? There are other forms of data. I'm happy to show you those if I have the time, but generally speaking, I'm just interested in this. So how do I turn that, in which it is basically just used Sunday and Thursday, and I'll explain why just Sunday and Thursday in a second. How do I turn that into that? This is actually my colleague in engineering, okay? You'll see how each of them have built up. Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, etc. So that's kind of where I want. This is where I start with. So I'm embarrassed and mortified at showing you. That's the kind of actuality of my day-to-day kind of teaching on the left, and that's kind of what I'm aiming for. Okay. So that's going to be the purpose today, to work out how it goes from there. Not in terms of just hours. My hours stop at 3.23. Here, there's 18.42, and these are classes, albeit at a different level at the university, but nevertheless similar cohort, okay, size. Okay, now this is my institutional virtue things. The University of Melbourne e-learning strategy. Travis and Gregor might have given you these before when they came over last time. Those of you who were here. Providing greater emphasis on student interaction and engagement by reorientating how information and community technologies are used in teaching, learning, and assessment. Okay, so this is not a behaviouralist approach, but simply about reorientating how we use technology in order to engage. It's not about turning IT hesitant students into IT gurus. Far from it. It's just to recognise how they use it to reorientate our teaching accordingly. To improve students' access to a coordinated suite of e-learning resources and experiences, regardless of their location and choice of device. So we have to be multi-platform, and we have to use a range of different kinds of things. So engage with new and existing cohorts of students in new ways through innovative curriculum delivery models. Now, this is actually going to be the focus today. Curriculum delivery. That's what I'm interested in. I'm not interested in the politics of Moodle versus Blackboard. I'm not interested in the politics of statistics. I'm interested in curriculum delivery, but it's going to be linked to how learning analytics can kind of do that. And foster excellence in learning technology by supporting learning-based leaders, rapidly appraising emerging technologies and fostering an evidence-based culture of educational technology research and development. This is going to be the sticky one. Okay, so apologies, this is going to be kind of the dull stuff. I'm going to be reviewing a range of learning management systems across Blackboard and Moodle, which is the kind of the other major player in kind of e-learning platforms. Reveals considerable attention paid to monitoring learner engagement and retention. So there's a lot of literature about there are just about spying on them, about knowing where and when they log in, looking at what they look at and for how long. There's a whole range of literature there, okay? So the literature review I focus on is really entirely based around my own curriculum area. Make no apologies for that. I'm not involved in the e-learning. I'm involved in teaching art and its histories. So in that, I focus mostly on that kind of thing. Now, by monitoring student engagement, you can better target disaffected learners who's struggling with the technology, those who require additional support, distance and part-time learners, for instance. So the literature tells us, I suppose, that learning analytics is good, so you can pick up on those who aren't engaging, so you can intervene. That's all very well and good, and don't get me wrong, I don't underestimate that. It also identifies those who perhaps might require further support in IT and other things as well. And it can also, of course, it fosters engagement and it fosters inclusion and all of those things. And this is all very, very good. Please don't get me wrong. I really value it. It's also generated literature on assessing the success and failure of online activities, and that's one of the things that's kind of interests me, I suppose, is how do we measure the success and failure of it? Okay. I'm going to have a bit of a pause here. There seems to be a bit of a problem with a lot of this literature, and there seems to be a little bit of a problem for me as an educator. Okay, frontline. So online is great for monitoring, but do I really want to be spending my Sunday nights just simply generating statistics to see who has accessed my lecture from the week before? Am I so vain that that matters to me? Actually, no. What matters, well, what's missing in all of this? I've been told about the importance of generating data to identify lack of engagement, for instance. What's missing? Anybody? Well, I'm going to focus on not just generating statistics, not just generating statistics in order to identify disengaged learners, but in terms of curriculum development. Okay? So this is actually from some recent research. Okay? From using e-learning as a stick to beat students with. Oh, I've gone online and I've just realised you haven't looked at the lectures. Maybe that's the reason you're struggling. That is not, I don't think, effective in that sense. Okay? You might want to track student work to clarify questions or to help a student understand what is required of them. Certainly, if a student doesn't seem to be getting a particular idea or concept, it may help you to work with them to see if they have or have not opened the work related to that concept you've placed in Blackboard. So immediately you are kind of using statistics to identify a student who's struggling and making a tangible link between their failure to go online, to your LMS, to your e-learning platform, and their failure in the course. It doesn't work like that. I wish it did. It would make it so much easier when it comes to actually examination board, but it doesn't. If you require students to participate in online discussions and a student hasn't logged in at all, that's also a useful piece of information. You can also use tracking to see which parts of your online class materials your students use most often. Now, this is the kind of hard-line kind of pedagogy that so many of my colleagues hate. It's the thing that turns so many of my colleagues into e-learning advocates, into e-learning haters. The idea that e-learning should be used as a stick in this way, as an evaluative measure. Okay. Now I want to move away from this, and I want to move in terms of away from monitoring for retention purposes. I also want to move us away, strictly speaking, for its use as an assessment tool. I actually want to use it instead for something else. This is from some of my colleagues at UNSW. Use the reporting system. Okay, the reporting system for Blackboard is its analytics. Okay, use the reporting system to keep students motivated by posting announcements about tools or content areas that are underutilized. Also monitor the course usage of students who are underperforming and provide additional support where necessary. I want to move away from a model where learning analytics is used to monitor student engagement and instead to turn it around to try and think about my engagement and my design and my desire to be online, for instance. So this is what matters to me, about motivation, about posting announcements, revealing content areas, tools that are underutilized, not punishing a student for not going on to that particular resource or that particular lecture, for instance, but identifying why is it that they haven't done that, how can I design a better interface, how is it that I can use that evaluation to aid my curriculum development. Now, Blackboard Analytics Student Management Suite. I'm guessing a lot of you probably won't be familiar with this if you don't have this, okay? All of this is fantastic, okay? Don't get me wrong, all of these things are important. Monitoring for retention, engagement, all that kind of thing, and supporting students who struggle. And whilst many of us at the kind of front line dread spending hours creating specific resources that are only used for like half an hour, okay? You spent 3 hours creating this beautiful kind of multiple choice questionnaire following up from the lecture last week, and then you realise that only 5 people have actually done it. It's soul destroying, okay? But my point is that reporting systems can aid the assessment of resources and activities that can lead us to think that e-learning strategy. It can also go to redesigning your learning management system to better promote, okay? So this presentation today, I guess, doesn't deny the importance and significance of employing reporting systems, but rather looks at other ways of employing the findings of these reports. Okay. So this is kind of what it looks like now. For reluctant teachers and coordinators, the e-learning incentive still tends towards the at-risk, attrition, and administrative. We go on to Blackboard's analytics in order to identify at-risk students, in order to look at attrition, and just simply from an administrative kind of point of view. Okay, to upload, to see what's being looked at, for instance. But it is this kind of call to discover new insights, manage course loads and class utilization, and using resources more effectively. That's what interests me. Okay, so my thesis. Okay, it's not really a thesis, but still, we'll go with it anyway. This is all well and good. What this project wonders, however, is how might these monitoring and evaluation tools be used to aid curriculum design and improve student engagement? So away from the stick and into the curriculum design. Using statistics not to damn or to punish, but to create new spaces of engagement where and when students want and need it. Okay? So I'm going to be looking not instead at the carrot, but the kind of the e-learning thing. Right? We all know students are online more. Okay? So this is not about this behaviouralist approach of encouraging students to go online more. Instead, it's to better understand where and when they go online and what they can do to make their online experience more purposeful with regards to their education. So we all know this story. Okay? And so part of the Melbourne e-learning strategy is about providing multiple platform support. And we've had some success with that, and in other ways we haven't as well. We're still learning about it as well. We also have this kind of what seems to be a kind of a binary kind of opposition between the blended, mostly online campus style of teaching, the one that I'm kind of entering into at the University of Melbourne atelier model, through to a blended, mostly online thing. Okay? Now, I work with practical students. They all have a studio. They work in painting, sculpture, drawing, print media, photography, etc., etc. Okay? Blended on, I've also taught exclusively masters by online teaching. Okay, the point is, of course, is that there is something in the middle of all of this that might be useful to us. Okay, that it isn't an either or. That we're neither kind of advocating sticking to the old lecture tutorial format, nor going completely online. And I'm interested in this kind of question of what the inside matters. I still think lectures are invaluable. I still think tutorials and face-to-face are invaluable. And I know that somewhat kind of swimming against the tide. I know some institutions here in Australia and elsewhere have pretty much abolished lectures, for instance, and now focus entirely upon tutorials. Or they focus attendance upon lectures, and so only just record 15 minutes, etc. I still believe of the value of lectures. And I still even believe in the value of exams and readings, hard copy readings, all of those things I still value, but I also recognise the emergence of new spaces. So I'm trying to find a space between that which seems to be an open university's online kind of module delivery through to that which I still think is invaluable in my subject area. So these are the 4 places where we believe learning takes place. So we have on-campus, in class, the old style model. And then we have off-campus, in class, okay? Which is kind of online, in an e-learning thing, okay? On-campus, out of class. So they're on campus, but they may be on the e-learning, etc., etc. And they're also off-campus, out of class, okay? The LMS employs a series of analytic tools that allows the instructor to analyse this mysterious 4th quarter. When are the students engaging with learning online, and how do we optimise it? How can we use the changing learning patterns to our advantage to engage with students at different times and in different places? Although it's impossible to offer any kind of catch-all behaviour, there are certain symptoms that have emerged in research done at the VCA and in my own courses. Okay. So what do we know of this space? When is it? How to identify it? Okay. When is it? I always like to kind of put this in as a little bit of an incendiary way. I don't know why I'm going to go for a senior lecturer next year, and this is probably going to scupper that completely. Because I think that where we are with MOOCs is, I think, a little bit too early to say, or too late to say, depending on where you are in the room, for instance. There are many, what I'm going to say is that I think that there are many sound principles of effective curriculum design being employed in MOOCs, and that we'd be silly to ignore them. But I'm going to return to this whole kind of question of online delivery and online course development, because I don't wish to kind of throw the baby out with the bathwater. And whilst I don't know where our MIT are with MOOCs, at the University of Melbourne I think we are moving further and further away from them. Expensive to run, generate a lot of students at the start, thousands of them at the start, and only 5 graduate. You know, and it's but nevertheless I think there's actually some very sound kind of principles at play in online delivery, etc. Okay. This report argues for the use of monitoring e-learning engagement to better understand changing learning patterns and behaviours. So it's not about changing those behaviours, but about understanding them better. We can use this to our students' advantage through improved curriculum design and more focused online presence. So this is not about adapting their behaviour online or off, but adapting our teaching and learning to ensure when the student wants to be engaged, they can be engaged. So by identifying trends in individuals and groups, we can start to think about modifying our teaching and learning strategies. Okay. This is what we all dread. Well, this is what I dread anyway. You might dread something different. I don't know. I wouldn't wish to say. Virtual learning environments as a kind of a learning dumping ground, a graveyard of PowerPoint lectures and handouts. Okay? You didn't go to the lecture, so you're going to go and look it up online. Or you don't go to the lecture because you can look it up online. It's essentially our learning management system is a dumping ground. And this is just another analytic tool to see where students are accessing, what they are accessing, and you'll just see that actually the things you want them to be focusing on, which are the things to aid their learning, to push their learning forward, are the things that they least employ. Instead, they just go on there to get the lecture. And also, what we'll see, of course, is that most of them access it for assessment purposes, either because they have to upload, or they have to answer questions online, or the exam is being delivered online, for instance. So that's where the peak traffic flow is, assessment and as a dumping ground. Okay. This is the kind of reality, I think, for many of us. This is the reality for me. There are certain peaks, okay? So this is from 2013, so this is a couple of years ago, and it's a lot better now. So I'm just going to show you the worst, and then I'm going to show you the best. There are certain kinds of peaks and troughs. Now, if you run a traditional 12 or 14-week semester, you might have certain things along the way. So let's kind of, I'm going to ask you what these kinds of, formative assessment. So what do we think this next peak one is then? Summative assessment. And what are the next peak? Feedback. That's why they go on, because they have to. Formative assessment, either which might be in class or it might not be. Okay? And I suspect that many of yours might look the same. Okay? I suspect it might. Okay? And mine does too. This is, as I say, this isn't imaginary data. This is absolutely generated. And you'll also notice during the recess period, absolutely none. And I think they go on again when it comes to like choosing their next modules, etc. So that's kind of my reality. But I'm not too keen on that. What I want to do is change this into something better. Right. When do you think the class is taught? Monday. When do you think the assessment is? Sorry, Friday. Sorry, got a bit ahead of myself there. The day before ITIS, okay? You're on Sunday either to look up the lecture for last week or to do the reading for this week. Sometime in the wee hours. It's 11 o'clock on Sunday, there's nothing good on TV, and there is nothing good on TV on Sunday at 11 o'clock anymore. And you've got a lecture at 9:30 on Monday morning. Okay? Your assessment's due in on Friday. So, when do our students go on to do their assessment? They do it on the Thursday night. If I'm lucky, often on the Friday night. So that's kind of just a simple thing. You can identify that. And I'm going, why is that? Why are the peaks? All right, things like that. Okay. This course is taught on a Tuesday. Okay? So you'll notice Monday is quite busy. Assessment points are always Wednesday, the day before ITIS. And this is another course that I teach. So this is the first example was first year course. This is the second year course that I teach, Critical and Theoretical Studies 3. So again, it's day before ITIS. So how do I turn this into that? And this is my esteemed colleague, Associate Professor Guillaume Nazarillo in Engineering Site Characteristics, similar sort of cohort to me, in terms of size, etc. And that's how his looks. They go on for a little time on Sunday, more time on Monday, more time on Tuesday, etc. So I'm wondering, how do I turn my lousy little course with my students who only go on because they have to, because of assessment, etc., and only go on the day before, into something which is much more cumulative? How do I change that? Well, I was lucky enough to work with him, actually. Okay, that's what I really wanted to do it. So I'm going to explain perhaps a little bit more in detail what these charts mean and how they were generated, but in short, how do I turn occasional learners into everyday and engaged learners? But much more on this later. Okay. So, all user activity within content areas. So this is my colleague in engineering. How many hits does he have? Now, hits are lousy measures of anything. 2.2 billion people, for instance, did learn how to do Gangnam Style. How many of them lasted more than 5 seconds? I have no idea. I know I didn't. So it's not necessarily a useful measure. Can anybody notice, however, what's happened in terms of the pie chart, for instance? Anybody noticed? Right. Well, same content. Sorry, I'm between two computers at the moment. Fewer areas. His is much tidier than mine. I thought, you know what, students don't want to have to go around searching for particular things. They don't want to see those endless, I think they're called tree chains, is that right, tree chains? You know, those endless kinds of clicking in folders, within folders, etc. Not true. Actually, students appreciate just a simple division between learning resources and assessment. They prefer, if it's tidier, they will rather go to, so for Guillermo, okay, he actually trimmed just the simple things down from 4. I think I had 8 distinct areas. When you go onto the LMS, you have 8 choices of where to go. Learning resources, library, formal lectures, tutorials, all of these different kinds of options. Actually, just trimming it down. So one of the kind of key recommendations, I suppose, for all of us is just tidy it up. Don't assume that students actually prefer a list of huge number of options. What I found was that students very, very rarely clicked on the things that I wanted them to do until I actually integrated that into a thing called learning resource or learning activity, for instance. So, less is more. So this is my kind of Blackboard LMS, okay? Okay, let's trim that down a little bit. It's still more than Guillermo's, but just by trimming them down, just by actually cutting it all down, actually students actually really engage with it. Now, as part of the qualitative research that I did, in student focus groups, complaints were often that they found it hard to navigate or that they couldn't locate a particular item. They were also reluctant to visit certain tabs, certain kinds of areas, okay, as they seem unrelated to the teaching and learning. They were simply just dumping grounds of timetables, etc. By organising the architecture of the learning management system so that it became more navigable, I became aware that offering discrete tabs tended to ring-fence teaching materials. learning and revision materials, support and resources. I had created divisions where I didn't want divisions to occur, where students made active choice between teaching materials and learning and revision materials. Okay? What happened? 22% rise in traffic compared with the same week in the previous semester. That's quite a lot. Quite a lot. Now, there are lots of reasons for that. I'm not suggesting this is only one of them. But certainly, and I'm not certainly making that tangible link, but certainly I looked at my colleague and just said, right, you have fewer content areas, but more users. Okay? So I said, well, let's tidy this up a little bit. Let's stop making those kinds of leaps. Adaptive release. Now, some of you might be familiar with adaptive release. Some of you might use it. Okay, it's a little bit scary, I think, a little sometimes, and it can go awful. It can go terribly wrong if you don't do it right. But nevertheless, what is it? Adaptive release refers to the release of materials throughout the course length, rather than all at the beginning. So rather than giving them 12 weeks of reading, you might give them, you might release the reading every week at the same time. Okay, staggering that out. Okay, specific criteria can be employed to determine when and to whom specific material can be released. So you can actually release particular material. If you're working in small groups, for instance, you can actually release all of those things. You can also release them by time. Okay, so I'm going to release all of my readings on a Monday in time for the Thursday lecture, or I'm going to release all of my readings on Friday for a Monday lecture, or something. I know that is kind of, it has a behaviouralist strategy to it, but it's actually just not about front-ending all of your resources. There are hurdle requirements, successful completion of an activity. Now, I have to say this divides people. Some people might love this art idea. In my subject, which is mostly fine art and design focused, with some art history in there as well, it's difficult to know what that is. But in my area, for instance, I want them to read things in a particular order. I want them to understand foundations. So, do we have any artists in here? Painters? No? One, maybe. So, if I want them to understand discourses on painting in the 20th century, and then I give them all of the readings at the front, they all head towards the funky, contemporary, sexy readers, Isabel Graw's, etc. They don't read the Clement Greenberg first. They don't read Roger Fry. I want to actually stagger the reading so they understand the fundamental principles before. So the only hurdle requirement I have is that they have to have read, or at least how we measure whether they understood it or not, that they have to have read one text before they move on to the next. Okay? So that's an example of a hurdle requirement. For other subjects, that's actually much more diagnostic and much more assessment. Okay? I need to know that you've understood this principle before you can move on. Certainly true in medicine, mathematics, social psychologies, all of these things. Okay? Those are important. For me, it's just quite simple. I actually have a kind of curriculum design in mind. And just by releasing all of the materials, I know that students just skip over the difficult bits, the foundational bits, and head straight towards the contemporary, and I don't want them to do that. You can also do it by individuals and groups, as I say. So if you have a student perhaps who you might identify as perhaps being struggled, not through the learning analytics, but just through working with them, you can release certain individuals, etc., but also certain groups. So I teach a common course amongst 4 or 5 different studio areas, okay? But I might want to release particular material to particular groups of students. So I'll have sculpture students receiving slightly different material from the painters, etc., etc. So these adaptive release kinds of things can be incredibly useful, okay? Any mixture of these. Now, I'm going to take a sip of water actually now, and hopefully the technology kind of won't fail me, okay? A short video that a colleague of mine has created, hopefully it works, and the sound is okay, relating to how this does. Because do people want to watch this, or do we want to move on? Do we all know how to do this? Right? Okay.
10 minutes, so.
Oh, I've got about 10 minutes. In that case, what I'll do is maybe I'll give you the resources or give you this. Sure, I'll pass it on. All right. So it's actually not. It's not hard. All it is, you just have to set up the parameters for it. Okay. But I am running out of time, so I'm gonna move on. Adaptive release by time. So that's kind of what it looks to. So for instance, I might kind of want to do a pre-lecture release task, okay? So I'm going to offer them a YouTube clip, and I'm going to set certain parameters for when it is released. But I know when I'm going to release it based on information I've already gained about when they're online. So if I know my students are online on Sunday night, I'm going to release some material for Sunday night. I don't have to be there. I don't have to be there when they're online. You can do that, and you can have chats, and you can do all of those kind of discussion boards at a time, and that's the value of it, okay? But generally speaking, you don't have to be there, okay? Adaptive release, pre-teaching activities, discussion online chats, they're all invaluable in that sense, okay? So this is what I wanted. This is what Guillermo was doing in engineering site characteristics, and I'll just give you a quick example, and then we'll have some FAQs. His reading and resources were drip-fed throughout the week. He designed his curriculum so as to build into progression. Okay? Lectures were recorded on Monday and released on Thursday. He did that quite strategically. Discussions, online tutorials and revisions relating to the Monday lecture were conducted on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. Okay? So the information, the type of information, and the type of follow-up information were all examined throughout the week. Okay? Feedback delivered on Friday. Okay? So now I don't know how flexible many of you will be about just simply changing the assessment date from a Wednesday to a Thursday. Okay? But it's something that I actually looked at and just said, well, maybe there's a way of timing the reading to the assessment to allow for certain things to take place. Okay. So this is the advice from UNSW. Okay. Consider releasing content on high days of high usage, which is kind of the thing that I've been doing. This information can be used in future course planning. Okay. So that's what I kind of did. This is one of my third year modules. It's about the year 1936 in art. Okay. So readings were released every Sunday for a Wednesday class. Okay? But they were only released once the readings and viewings from the previous week had been visited and reviewed. Okay? So I just gave them a quick pop quiz afterwards. Okay? Discussions relating to the reading were made available in the 48 hours preceding the taught session. Discussions relating to the taught session became active in the 48 hours following the session. So I had pre-release activities relating to the reading, and then activities following the taught session. Okay? Because I think what's important is incentive and reward. Students value their contributions to forms being recognised in the lectures. Not always easy. Okay? But in a third year seminar situation where I maybe have 20 to 25 students, it was much easier to actually just say, you know, so-and-so made a contribution and make reference to it, to actually recognise students' value. Okay? So we found that referring to discussion points relating to the reading and the discussion incentivized others to contribute to the direction and understanding of a particular subject area, and rewarded those that did. So those that were present and had contributed prior to the taught session could see the value of that, and that those who hadn't could perhaps recognize the value of that, and they did pick it up next week. Each week began with a review of last week's post-session discussion, and then the week's reading discussion. So this is kind of, I'd say I'm a cold-faced teacher. This is the kind of stuff that I've been doing. So we began each week's session of a review of last week's post-session discussion, and then we moved on to that week's reading discussion, integrating what has gone on online into the structure of the class. Students found pre-session contribution led to them being better prepared than those who did not, because we were able to discuss the difficulties of the text, the difficulties of the discourse. They also found that they were awarded some insight into the coming session. Okay. So there are adaptive release multiples, so there are multiple kind of conditions in which you can release material. Okay. Now my point is, of course, is that you should understand where and when students are doing it, so you can release them at the appropriate time and to identify that structure. Okay. So I'm coming towards the end, I suppose, but it's much better now. In-year improvement in hits, which as I said is a lousy measure, but it is a measure nonetheless, 32%. Year-on-year improvement, 60%. I'm not saying it's me, but since I joined certainly it has joined because it has improved, etc. Increased time spent online per student, 45 minutes. We also have better student experience surveys. Those things that we have in our annual PDF when we're going for promotion or we're going for our increment or whatever, student experience surveys. I know that they're not necessarily the most popular things, but they are there. Okay. What has all this meant? I think I have a better understanding of my students' online learning behaviour, and I think that I'm able to respond by providing adaptive release materials that engage with learners when they are attuned to learning. I can better incentivise and reward online participation. I can actually spend more time developing resources. Okay? If you're anything like me, how I used to practice was that you went onto the learning management system, your e-learning platform, when you had the time throughout the 12 or 14-week semester. Half an hour here, upload that, take that down, set up the assessment, etc. I actually found that by organising all of this in advance, that actually I spent more time responding and developing new resources rather than actually just spending all of my time here and there. How so? Okay? Using adaptive release technologies, I can organise my entire course before teaching takes place, where all the readings occur, where all the assessments occur, etc. Successful online taught courses and MOOCs have realised this. So whilst we may not be sold entirely on the massive open online courses, some of you might know about, actually they have a great deal of these principles put in place that are actually quite useful. Every reading, every discussion, every activity is already lined up. I can then concentrate on responding and supporting. And I'm not spending my Monday morning before my Tuesday lecture getting things online. They're already there. Flipped classroom, well, I know this is a kind of pedagogical kind of idea of you know, the students are learning online and we're actually responding to that learning. I'm not quite sure, not quite. Okay, so I've got some recommendations and then we'll come to the end. Identify your own students' online learning behaviour. They will be different to my students. Okay, evaluate your own learning management system. Okay, don't be afraid of redesigning it. Okay, if you have the opportunity to take off tabs, regroup areas, relabel areas, do so. Okay? It doesn't necessarily mean less, but clean up that existing content. I can tell you students do not like having 12 tabs staring in front of them, particularly if they're using an iPad app, if they use Blackboard iPad. It quickly gets really, really messy. Using adaptive release, you can incentivise and encourage day-to-day e-learning. You can focus on the pedagogy and not on the tools. And you can, hopefully, the time spent developing a successful, completely adaptive release will be repaid throughout the year. Okay, I'm just going to run through a quick FAQs and then I'm going to hand it over to you. Who are you and why? Who are you and why are you here? I'm still not too sure. How much time do you spend setting this up, and does it pay off? Yes, it does. Okay, I set up a first-year compulsory course for 140 students, and it took a day. Okay, 6 hours perhaps, setting up all of the readings being released on the same day over the 12 weeks, all of the assessment points, all set up, all of the discussion boards, the pre-teaching, etc. It took me a day. But you know what? I didn't have to touch it again until the very end. It wasn't this half an hour here, hour there, if I got the time, have I got a teaching assistant or a sessional staff who can do it for me, if I buy them a bottle of beer or something. And yes, I have done that. Okay, so yes, it does pay off in my opinion. Okay, it looks fiddly and it is the first time you do it. Once you've done it, on Blackboard, you can migrate it. You can migrate many of the principles. So I only had to set it up once. When I taught the same course next year, it took 2 hours. All I did was update some of the readings that needed to be updated, change the dates on the assessments. Everything was in place. What other incentives do you offer for e-learning engagement? Okay, well, I offer in-class engagement. Okay, I also offer students curriculum alternatives for assessment. By identifying those who are perhaps willing to engage in a different manner, in a different mode, I'm able to do that. Now that depends on your learning and teaching curriculum committee and how your modules are based. But by offering students, instead of an exam, I'm going to offer you this, etc. Am I disempowering face-to-face teaching? Far from it. I hope not, actually. I hope not, because actually most of my Adaptive release is about pre-release and post-taught session kind of thing. So it's not, I don't think, a flipped classroom. I still value lectures, I still value tutorials. What I value is identifying where and when learning takes place so that I can better identify it. So that's it. Was that okay? Was that 45 minutes?
That's excellent.
Thank you. All right, there we go.
We've got a few minutes left for...
So questions, yeah, please.
A couple of questions. I wouldn't mind knowing, Toby, did you get the change of spread across your analytics?
Sorry?
During the week, did you get the change? How did the profile look?
All right. The profile looked, for the first iteration of this, it looked very much the same. Students get ingrained in their kind of e-learning activities, however. When I started releasing readings, for instance, on a Sunday night, of course, that actually spiked. Okay. When I actually changed the assessment day from a Friday to a Wednesday, and then I also gave what I didn't talk about today is I gave a 2-hour online kind of chat space on a Tuesday. It did spread out. It's still not there. I suspect some of my students will never kind of be there, but it's certainly a lot better than it was. It still has its peaks and troughs on particular days. I'm still learning about that. I'm still looking at it. It's not quite still as good as engineering.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, what that does, and now seriously, I haven't generated that data. That just is, he's put a lot of thought and effort into it, probably more than I have. Yeah.
Any questions?
I hope that made sense. Sorry. Yeah.
I was just wondering about the difference between assuming that there is a pattern of student engagement before you start, as opposed to the student engagement perhaps around what you do. So,
Yeah.
like, can you actually find an already established pattern of student engagement?
To a certain extent, I think you can. Whether or not that pattern is one that's actually born out of the curriculum or is born out of their particular preferred kind of learning method, I couldn't say. This hovers. I began by saying this isn't a kind of behaviouralist approach about trying to change their behaviour, but then I realised it probably kind of hovers in that kind of grey area between that. What I want to do is I want to know that when they're online. I want to know when they're online, so that I can target stuff. But I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Well, I wonder whether there are particular times of week that students are going to have more time to be on.
Sure.
I don't know. My students' employment activities, so let's face it, all of our students are working a lot more hours than we did in the university. They're all over the place. So, I don't know if there is a standard student.
It's certainly becoming less standard. It's certainly becoming less standard. I certainly appreciate that. I guarantee Sunday night is always peaked. I can tell you that, Sunday night. So now that doesn't mean you have to be online on Sunday night. But I can tell you there's nothing good on TV. Not many of them will probably be working, okay? And if that means that's when you release your pre-lecture activity, or if that means that's when you do your post-lecture session, then that's fine. It's not a model, and this is the model that I've employed for my students, okay? And this is why it has to be done for yours. Now, there may not be a distinct pattern emerging, but that doesn't. But the principles remain the same about staggering these things out in order to engage them whilst they're there, to avoid that peak and trough, I guess. But each student will be different. I know Guillermo's students, but again, the Sunday spike. But yeah, identify your own patterns, and if there are no clear patterns, I think that the actual principles of adaptive release remain the same. I think. But yeah, sure.
Okay, one more question.
Yes, I wondered, you haven't talked about learning outcomes or grades or so on, and I just wondered whether you have noticed any correlation between the changes that you've made and better learning.
That's a hard one to prove, unless, of course, you're in a room trying to explain why you should be made senior lecturer, in which case it's a very easy thing to prove. Yes, I think there is. Certainly attrition has, but this is only part of the story, and it is only part of the story. What I don't want to kind of answer that, and the reason I don't want to answer that is I don't want to make a causal link between those students who don't engage with e-learning and their failure and those who do with their success. I suspect it's much more multifaceted than that, so I'm actually going to avoid that. I suspect that it is, so just between you and me, yes, but I don't want to say so because actually that can be a stick as much as a carrot. But yes.
So anecdotally, do you get positive feedback from them?
We get we undertake student focus groups, particularly on e-learning, and certainly there is. They're just saying that actually they're able to stagger their activities throughout the week much better, so they're able to organise their reading. So rather than giving them a huge reader, 400 pages at the start of week 12, instead we just give it to them. So they're able to manage their learning better. That's what we found out. Okay, we found out that actually they know exactly what they're supposed to be doing and when. So certainly in qualitative research we've undertaken, students have responded very positively to this.
Okay, that sounds a very good note to finish on, I think. So will you please...
Yes.